Don't disrespect the champs. 14 straight wins? Not a contender. Ranting illogically should be your channel name. Loves Philly and hates, and I mean detests, the Raptors. The bias against the Raptors is unreal, Tucker. Shaking my head. That right there, that comment accusing me of being a Philadelphia 76ers fan based off all of the videos I've made about Philly, and for the large part they have been negative, that comment right there was the one that set me off. Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and today's video is a letter to angry Raptors fans. Now, I made a video a couple of days ago talking about the Eastern Conference as a whole, and the point of that video was just to say that there's a lot going on and not many things make sense in the East in terms of matchups. There's a couple of teams that can do well against others. Some teams don't do as well against others. And it's going to be a crazy postseason, and it's hard to really pinpoint who are the true favorites. But coming out of that video, basically every Raptors fan was upset that they felt like I wasn't giving their team enough credit. Now, maybe I wasn't articulate enough in giving my reasons why I don't necessarily believe in this team in the postseason, but I'm covering almost half the teams in the Eastern Conference in one video, and the point of it wasn't really to just talk about the Raptors the whole time, but the point of this video is to talk about the Raptors the whole time. Now, first up, let's give the Raptors some much-deserved credit. They made a great trade last year, one of the greatest trades of all time, to bring in Kawhi. It led directly to a championship. They went on a great run, and it was a monumental championship. And to this point this season, they've been really impressive in the regular season. Siakam has made a leap, VanVleet has been really good, Lowry has been a steadying presence, and they have the second best record in the Eastern Conference, despite every single one of the guys that I mentioned previously having missed 10 games to this point in the season. But the point of this video is the fact that it was made to me to seem like I'm not even allowed to have a negative opinion about the Toronto Raptors simply because they won a championship last year with a different team. And so now that I've given this fan base the credit that for some reason after winning a championship they've so desperately craved, let's talk about why I don't believe in this team in the postseason. There's three main points here. One, for me, I think that this is one of those teams that the sum of the parts is greater than the individual. They're playing extremely well as a team, but in terms of individual talent, I don't think they're nearly on the same level as they were last year. Number two, Kawhi isn't there anymore, that's not debatable. And number three, both of those first two things are going to become much more prominent once we get to the postseason. Now, those are generally the same points that I made in the previous video, again, without the proper time to really expand upon them. So we're gonna go ahead and expand upon them in this video. So let's talk about the core three guys that are really gonna make this work for this Raptors team. Above all else, if they're gonna have success this year, specifically in the postseason, it's gonna come down to Siakam, Lowry, and VanVleet. Yes, they have other guys on this roster that are making really good contributions, but ultimately in the postseason, it comes down to your best players. So let's talk about them in terms of their postseason success leading up to this season. So Kyle Lowry, let's start there. He had a really great run in the postseason last year and really flipped his reputation as a guy that didn't perform well in the postseason to someone that went on a really great run throughout the playoffs last year, earned himself a championship for it. However, let's look at his playoff stats from 2015 to 2018. So the last 4 years in Toronto with the exception of last season. He shoots less than 35% from three, less than 44% from the field, and has an 18-26 record in the postseason in those seasons. Now, to be fair, 18 playoff wins is still a lot of wins, and LeBron was there, but there are plenty of excuses to make for every single player while LeBron was still in the Eastern Conference, and objectively, you can say that before last playoffs, Kyle Lowry was not a good postseason performer. And now let's talk about a much more stark contrast here, and it's Fred VanVleet. So for most of the postseason last year, at least the front half, he was not very good at all. And then you get to game 5 of the Bucks series, he goes 7 for 9 from three-point range, and then goes on a great run, has a really good finals, and is one of the most important reasons why they ended up winning a championship. But let's talk about his postseason before that game 5 against Milwaukee. He was 22 of 78 from the field, that's 28%, and that includes a 5 for 6 performance from the field in game 4 of that Bucks series, so if you take that out, it's even worse. Also, he's 11 for 44 from three-point range, that's 25% up until that point. Again, that also includes a strong game 4 against the Bucks in which he went 3 for 3 from three-point range, so if you take that out, those numbers are even worse. So Does anybody else remember? Is it only me that remembers Fred VanVleet not being very good at all in that postseason, to the point where there were some people making the argument that Jeremy Lin should be getting some, if not the majority of his minutes in that postseason because of how poorly he was playing? Jeremy Lin, a guy that just a couple months later was out of the league. And if you don't remember that, I have the receipts. Keith Smith, May 5th, 2019. I know VanVleet has been a key guy for Toronto, but Nurse might want to consider giving some run to Jeremy Lin at some point. VanVleet has been awful all series long. And now we get to Siakam, who probably it's the most difficult to make a case against him in terms of his postseason last year, because for the majority of it, he was really, really good. He had a couple of rough games, specifically in that Philly series. Games 2 and Game 7 weren't very good for him, but to be fair, nobody really had a good game in Game 7. So the part for him that makes me nervous more than anything else is one that also applies to every single member of this Raptors roster that was also on that team that made the postseason run last year. Not having Kawhi Leonard on the floor is going to be so impactful when we get to the playoffs. They've managed to replace his statistical production so far in the regular season, and that's why they haven't really, lost that much of a step, and that was the case last year as well. They were really good in the regular season in games without Kawhi. But when you get to the postseason, are guys like Siakam and VanVleet and Lowry going to be able to keep up their production from later on in last postseason, as well as to this point in the regular season, without Leonard there to attract the attention of the defense and to make plays for them? All of their production and their efficiency is going to decrease in the postseason, more so than it normally would in a typical postseason, as it does for many players, because they won't have Leonard there. Because when you take out some of the stuff that they did in the postseason last year, there's a very strong statistical case against these guys somehow replicating that again in the playoffs. And I can already hear it. Some of you guys in your head are already thinking, well, you have to watch the games. You can't just look at the stats. Of course I watched the games. Do you really think I'm going to make a video about the Raptors or about any team and have not watched them in the playoffs last year and to this point in the regular season? Of course I've watched them. I've been complimentary of them in that video and in the beginning of this one. They've been really good so far in the regular season. They've managed to replace the statistical production of Kawhi, and they've been one of the better stories in the NBA to this point in the season, and they have a really long winning streak going right now. I don't think any of that matters in the postseason. That's the point that I'm making here. And the fact that people are trying to say that I'm not allowed to have that opinion just because they won a ring last year with one of the best players in the league on their team who is now playing elsewhere, I don't think it makes sense that I'm somehow not allowed to argue against them. Very good regular season team. And maybe depending on the matchups, they'll make it to the conference finals. They play well together as a team. I'm giving them credit. I just don't believe in this team in the postseason after having lost Kawhi. And some of you guys are in the comments telling me that they should be a finals team, or they should be the favorite in the East, or they could potentially win the championship. I don't think that's the case at all. Very, very good regular season team. The impact of Kawhi Leonard and not having him there has to be discussed. And it's just really irritating, quite frankly, that I'm somehow not allowed to have a differing opinion and that I'm biased against Toronto. Because think about this for a second. If anybody is going to view last year's team differently than what they actually were, a very, very good team with one of the best players in the league on their team that went on a great postseason run and still almost didn't win the championship, by the way. If they don't have Kawhi, they don't win Game 7 against Philly. If they don't have Kawhi, they don't beat the Bucks in the Eastern Conference Finals. This team right now, if you put them in that exact situation from last season, they're not beating Philly in Game 7 and they're not beating Milwaukee in the Eastern Conference Finals. I don't understand how that's suddenly different because they have a championship ring now in their trophy case at home. And so if there's a group of people that's going to view that team differently and this year's team differently, if there's going to be a group that's going to be biased for this group and view them with rose-colored glasses, it's not going to be me. It's going to be y'all. It's going to be Raptors fans that are so engrossed in how good this team is playing this year, how well they played last year. I'm not the biased one here. I'm watching the games. I'm objectively giving an opinion and looking at it and saying, I'm not buying it. And that's okay. What's not okay is to say, I'm a huge fan of this team. I watched them all last year, and I just think that they're going to be really good in the postseason just because, despite the fact that there are so many points against it. Now, maybe you want to play this video back in a couple of months and say, look at this guy. He didn't know what he was talking about. This team ended up making the conference finals of the finals. If you want to take a victory lap, by all means, take a victory lap. But I'm confident in the opinion that I have here because I've looked into it, I've done the research, and I'm allowed to have that opinion. It could be wrong. It wouldn't be the first time. It wouldn't be the 20th time that I've been wrong on this channel. But to act like I can't even have this opinion, that is true bias. Not what I discussed in that previous video or at any point in this video. And yeah, there you have it. That's going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.